and welcome back to Uplift Equine Equestrian Education. So last week we did a kind of an overview of sensible blanketing, and it went through that one veterinary article, and it was kind of like, okay, this is how generally you should look at blanketing, and how you should blanket your horse based off of all of the information presented in that article. Now this week I'd like to go through a second article from the University of Kentucky. I did this originally in one big long video, and it was just so long, and I'm like, oh my gosh, people are never going to watch to the end for this. So I broke it up into two pieces. So if you see this kind of like it's disjointed, you've got this intro video, and then you've got, you know, me talking in another outfit and all of that. It was because it was filmed in the same go. So I hope you enjoy this. This is a little bit more of a deep dive. We go into thermoregulation with this one, so this is just if you want to geek out about horse blanketing, or if you just want some more information as a horse professional, horse owner on this. But yeah, let me know how it goes. Please comment. And this video is brought to you by my live lesson students in Central Indiana. So students, if you have hired me for my services, thank you for being such good clients and such good horse owners. You guys really take care of your horses very well. So for the rest of you, let me know if you are interested in my coaching service. I do live for the Central Indiana area, and I also do online lessons. So please message me at upliftequine or upliftequine@gmail.com if you are interested. So here's the deep dive. So I want to quote another education website for more information, which is from the University of Kentucky's website. Some people are adamant about blanketing, and some people are the exact opposite, unyielding about not blanketing their horse in the winter. So you can have two extremes with a lot of horse people. So the question remains, do horses need to be blanketed when the weather turns cold? The thermoneutral zone, or TNZ, describes a range of temperatures in the environment in which a standard healthy adult, in case of humans naked standing upright in the still air, can maintain a normal body temperature without needing energy above the normal basal metabolic rate. For humans, the thermoneutral zone is between 77 and 86 degrees. Again, no clothing on. Not that you would go around with no clothing on, but for this information. Fahrenheit. Because different people have different metabolic rates, the TNZ for some people is lower than for others. With light clothing, the TNZ decreases, and the comfortable temperature in a building with controlled temperature may be 65 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. The horse's TNZ is considerably lower than humans at 41 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. This is why it's important to be very careful in any weather above 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Two other important temperature calculations to keep in mind are the lower critical temperature, so LCT, and the upper critical temperature, the UCT. The LCT is defined as the lowest temperature in the TNZ and is the temperature below which the horse must increase metabolic rate to generate heat to maintain a normal core body temperature, whereas the UCT is defined as the temperature in which the horse must work to lower its core body temperature to maintain TNZ by dilating the blood vessels in the skin, sweating, and increasing their respiratory rate. Warm-blooded animals can maintain body temperature higher than their normal environment by regulating their metabolic process. Metabolism, the process that maintains all function of the body working properly and includes digestion, respiration, circulation, and all chemical reactions used by the cells to break down and utilize nutrients, will generate body heat. For example, muscle contraction is a type of metabolic process that generates heat. This is why humans can become hot and sweat when they exercise, and so do horses, whereas the other animals such as cattle, dogs, and birds will pant instead of sweating. Because that extra heat generated by the muscle contractions and increased circulation must be dissipated to maintain internal body temperature in the stable range. Conversely, when considering cold weather, the body must ensure it can minimize the loss of heat so it can maintain its core body temperature. In general, horses have a well-developed insulation in order to retain body heat, which includes their coat or fur, subcutaneous fat, and relatively large muscles and digestive system. When the insulation is insufficient to maintain body temperature, they may resort to several mechanisms to produce more heat or decrease heat loss, such as shivering, rapid muscle contractions that stimulate metabolism to produce more heat. This is a moderate mechanism that can be maintained for extended periods of time. Digestion. A horse generates body heat through the digestion and indigestive foods. As the horse digests its forage, the gut activity will create heat and help warm the body from within. Therefore, it is important to offer good quality and increased quantities of hay to horses during cold weather. Piloerection, such as goosebumps, some as goosebumps in humans, characterized by bristling and raising the body hairs, which will increase the insulating effect of the coat by allowing more air in the space between the hairs. However, horses in rain or wet snow will lose their piloerection ability, allowing the water to reach the skin and cool the body. Now, this depends on the type of rain. If it is like a light mist or a light rain, the rain will be directed away from the skin and the skin will remain dry, but it is also, just like this says, it prevents the horse from getting that air to warm it and insulate their body. So you need to be careful about wind and rain and the amount of rain. So if it is absolutely heavy rain and they have no area to go and hide from that rain, then the entire coat will eventually become saturated and they will be wet. Another one is vasoconstriction, decreasing the diameter of blood vessels of the limbs and other extremities, muscle and ears, which limit heat loss. Decreasing of the respiratory rate. So by breathing less frequently, the horse will reduce the heat lost in expired breath. While humans have a higher TNZ and will become cold and possibly hypothermic when the environment gets below the LCT, and therefore need to add layers of clothing to maintain core body temperature, horses are more adapted to tolerate cooler temperatures and don't need to hype up their metabolism to keep warm until environmental temperatures have dropped below 41 degrees Fahrenheit. So how can you determine if your horse needs help staying warm this winter by being blanketed? Some breeds or morphological types are more suited for cold or hot climates. For example, horses that are heavier, thicker bones, compact limbs, long-haired, feathers and fetlocks, have thick skin, prevents the heat loss and blood circulation, and subcutaneous fat such as draft breeds, some warm blood breeds, some ponies, and other horses that have this phenotype such as cobs, are more adapted to the cold weather. Conversely, horses with lighter bones, longer limbs, leaner muscles, thinner skin, silkier hair coat, and clearly visible blood vessels under the skin, light breeds such as thoroughbreds, standardbreds, and Arabians, etc., are more easily adapted to warmer climates and may become colder more easily as well. Blankets can be very important and life-saving. For some horses, in areas where winters are long, temperatures are below freezing for long periods of time, or just above freezing but rainy, and horses that are thin, immunocompromised, geriatric horses, and those that don't grow a thick hair coat, or who live outside 24/7 with no access to shelter, should be blanketed, period. Conversely, healthy horses with a decent body condition that have been acclimated to the geographical area, have access to shelter, have grown a thick winter coat, have plenty of forage to eat, may not necessarily need to be blanketed. Horses that are clipped should be blanketed, period. If the weather turns cool, even if they are stabled. Because unless the stable is regulated by a heater, which most of them are not, because that would be extremely expensive, they have no way of moving around enough to create more body heat. And much of the time, they don't have access to 24/7 forage because it is very difficult to fit a round bale or enough forage into that stable environment unless you just throw a whole bale of hay in there. And depending on the horse, sometimes they'll gobble it up really quickly or sometimes they'll save it. It really depends on the horse. And so if you are in a stabled environment and have a clipped horse, please blanket your horse. Stable blankets are exactly for that. It is also important to treat each horse as an individual and tend to each horses individually when it comes to blanketing. Horses that are cold typically huddle together and are reluctant to move from sheltered space if they are outside, or may not want to leave their stalls if they are inside. Believe me, I know, and if you are managing a barn or own a barn, you also know. Blanketing needs to be something dynamic, and temperature is not the single factor to take into consideration when making a decision on whether or not to blanket. Putting a blanket on in December and taking it off in April is not acceptable. Blanketing is a daily commitment and requires planning. Believe me, I don't necessarily see my horse every day, but I do look at the temperatures during the week and figure out when I need to come and go to the barn to make sure that I adjust for the needs of my horse. For example, if it is 20 degrees Fahrenheit, but sunny, not windy, one of those really nice winter days, the horse may not even need to be blanketed. On the other hand, if it is 45 degrees Fahrenheit and raining and the horse will not be brought in for a chance to dry and will be out all night when the temperature may go below freezing, these horses may need to be blanketed. Some of the arguments we encounter from die-hard, do not blanket people are listed below, along with our counter-arguments. And what I mean by our counter-arguments is the University of Kentucky. I am still reading this quote from them. Argument: horses in the wild are fine unblanketed in wintry weather. Counter-argument: horses that can't stand in the cold could not survive. That is one of those natural things that happen. That means that horse is going to die and then become lunch for wolves and bobcats and all of those things. So, do you want that to happen to your horse? I would not. No. Argument number 2. You're taking away what Mother Nature has provided the horse, the ability to stay warm with a long hair coat. Counter argument: pastured horses with access to shelter to shield them from the wind and precipitation may not need a heavy blanket, heavy blankets to keep them comfortable. But it's okay for horses with no way to block the wind and rain to have some sort of defense against the worst winter weather. Do most domestic horses survive winter without a blanket? They sure do, but they may lose weight in the process and they may take time in the spring for them to gain weight back and to stay at an acceptable BCS. I want to add to that myself. Shivering can also lead to muscle contractions, but can also lead to a lot of discomfort when you are trying to train. So if you're trying to train in the winter and the horse is constantly shivering to keep themselves warm, then they will be way more sore and probably have some training issues, such as defensiveness or inability to really bend or flex because they've been shivering all day. So you need to consider that too. Argument number 3. It's raining and I don't have time to wait for my horse to dry, so I'm not going to blanket him. Counter argument: although, ideally, you would let the horse dry before putting on a blanket, it is more important that the blanket be on if the temps dip after a rain. It's okay to put on a blanket on a wet horse in those that situation. The blanket will wick the moisture away from the horse and extra moisture will evaporate. You can check the horse later and you will find that it is dry underneath the blanket. Blanketing a wet horse will increase the chances of developing rain rot, but it's better to deal with that potential rain rot later than to deal with a colicky horse that has gotten too cold. So a horse can colic if it is too cold and wet because they are shivering. Shivering, like I said before, includes a lot of muscle contractions, and those muscle contractions can inhibit their gut, which causes colic. We don't want a colicky horse. I'd rather, same deal, I would rather deal with some rain rot than deal with life-threatening colic. Argument number 4. Putting on a blanket on a horse with thick coat hairs weighs the hair down, eliminating the ability to fluff up and trap air in between the hairs, making him colder. Counter-argument. There's no scientific research that says that blankets flattening the hair coat actually makes the horse colder. Argument number 5. My horse doesn't like blankets. Counter-argument. Yes, there are horses that don't do well with blankets, but the majority of horses do well. In a study done in Norway, the researchers trained horses to convey choices by pointing to symbols. The horses that were then exposed to different weather conditions, the horses indicated their choice to have a blanket on during weather that was wet, windy, and cold. For the horses that destroy their blankets, there are manufacturers that offer 3-year warranties to lifetime warranties. The other thing that you should consider is temperature. So like temperature when the horse seems to need the blanket. My horse does not like wearing, quote, horse clothing, especially fly clothing. So, if he's too hot, he doesn't like wearing anything. But if he gets too cold, he will gladly keep the blanket on. And like I said before, if he's starting to get too hot and I didn't get to the barn fast enough, he will Houdini himself out of the back straps and then flip the coat or the blanket over his back and over his shoulders to keep his butt out. So therefore, he will do something about it if he's too hot and I didn't get to the barn fast enough. So you got to consider that the horse may not like the blanket because the horse might just be too hot. But what type of blanket and when? If your horse grows a nice, thick hair coat, has access to shelter, or lives in a place where the weather is mild, he most likely will not need to be blanketed. However, if you do need to blanket your horse based on the aforementioned information, you don't need to buy every weight. Blankets are labeled by weight, indicating how much fill insulation they have to assist in keeping the horse warm. The higher the fill, the heavier the blanket, and the colder the temperature it is designed for. Sheets generally have no fill. Medium weight blankets typically offer between 150 and 225 grams of fill. And heavyweight blankets range between 250 and 400 grams of fill. Blankets that are also further divided into turnout and stable blankets. Turnout meaning they are waterproof, more resistant material or fabric, and stable meaning not waterproof, and many more types of silky material. As a general guideline, a waterproof turnout sheet, no fill, offers protection from the wind and the rain. But don't add too much warmth if the weather will be below the mid-30s. A medium or heavyweight blanket may do more to keep the horse warm as temperatures go below freezing and into the single digits. If you have only one choice of blanket, invest in a turnout medium weight blanket, as this can be used in the mid-40s and rainy down to the teens. And even though the term turnout indicates the blanket should be used outside, it is perfectly fine to use in the stable as well. Unlike stable blankets that can only be used indoors because the lack of waterproof and possibly weaker material. Remember, when they're outside, they roll around, there might be a rock here or two, and there are other horses. Other horses tend to kind of nip at the blankets when they're playing, and a stable blanket, I guarantee you, cannot hold up to that. So, when you're investing in your blankets, generally turnout blanket is best. Blanketing requires diligence in watching the weather and committing to changing blankets to be sure that your horse is comfortable in what he's wearing every day. Using a bit of common sense will go a long way to keeping your horse healthy and happy. If he's shivering, add some weather protection. If you place your hand under his blanket and he's hot, opt for a lighter weight. Proper fit is paramount. A properly fitting blanket should not cause any rubs or sores on a horse. A blanket that fits well will not bind around the neck, preventing the horse from putting his head down or using his shoulder completely. There should be also no pressure on his withers. There are many different cuts and styles of blankets, and some manufacturers even make blankets for different body types. For example, high-withered, narrower-chested thoroughbreds and low-withered, broader-chested quarter horses. There are blankets that are longer, going below the elbow and almost to the knee, and some that reach just below the elbow. Some blankets have a tail flap, generally turnout blankets do, and whereas others don't, generally breed-specific for saddlebreds or stable blankets. How to measure for a blanket that fits. A blanket that doesn't fit well can be more than just uncomfortable for your horse. It can be dangerous. If it is so big that the horse's hoof gets caught in it while laying down, though manufacturers may use different sizing, the way your horse is measured stays the same. To be sure you get the most accurate measurement, you will need a helper and a cloth measuring tape, or any measuring tape. Stand your horse squarely on a level surface. Have your friend at the horse's head holding the measuring tape at the center of his chest. Wrap the tape around one side of his body and wrap it around the widest part of his haunches. Take note of the measurement where you expect his blanket to end. If the measurement is in between blanket sizes, it's best to choose the smaller size. Conclusion. Choose to blanket your horse if he is geriatric, thin, clipped, immunocompromised. Watch the weather to be careful to determine if the blanket you have on him is appropriate for the conditions to which he is exposed. Always adjust the belly straps so that they are snug against the horse's body. Dangling straps are a hazard to legs, as they can get caught if the horse lays down and gets up. This can be catastrophic. Check your horse's blanket after it rains to be sure it is still waterproof. A soaked horse is made even more uncomfortable if he is weighed down with a soaking saturated blanket. Remember to check under the blanket periodically to assess the health of the skin and the horse's body condition. I do personally understand these temps and how physical activity and food affects the tolerance of the weather. From working in weather for 10 plus hours at a time in an airport, where there was no windbreak. And I personally know how the wind affects the effectiveness of certain deniers and layers. So personally, I've been through a lot of these things. At night, during night shift and out there for 10 plus hours, sometimes 16 hours. And I know how much eating during that time and moving around can affect the tolerance of the weather. So sometimes I got too hot, but it was like 10 degrees out, but I'm moving around, I'm too hot. Sometimes it could be 50-mile-an-hour winds, and no matter how many layers you have on, if you are not in a windbreak, all that winds get coming through or coming under. Things like that will happen. But if you're in a windbreak and it's 50-mile-an-hour winds and you have the appropriate amount of clothing, that makes a huge difference, like huge difference. So I'm saying this out of experience. Just consider what your horse is going through based off of all of the information that I have thrown at you in this video. So thank you for hanging in there if you have made it to the end. And I appreciate you all. And thank you, patrons, for continuously supporting this channel and supporting my endeavors in educating equestrians. So I hope you have a wonderful time. Have a wonderful winter weather season. and I will talk to you later.